I address this video particularly to the youth of India. The main focus of attention in the thoughts that this video presents is on the predicament of the youth, particularly in light of the burden of meaninglessness and worthlessness that young people tend to carry increasingly in our times. I remember reading a book some time ago dealing with the predicament of the youths. I forget the title, I forget the name of the author, but I remember a sentence which stuck to my memory. It says, "The youth of today have everything to live with, but nothing to live for." I think this is a statement worth remembering, and I have to say that it influenced me a great deal, and that's the reason why, even after my forgetting the title of the book and the name of the author, the sentence remains etched clearly in the tablet of my memory. So, young people, as everyone knows, are particularly mindful and keen to develop their personality. But most people do not know, first of all, what personality means, and secondly, how to develop it. If you don't know, then how do you go about developing what you do not know? And therefore, through this video, I thought I would address an aspect of this vast theme, and quite naturally, I'll follow this with a series of related videos. And I invite all young people, irrespective of their backgrounds of religion, culture, language, etc., to participate in this process. And I pray sincerely that this may prove a useful and relevant resource to young people. Young people face a particular problem. And that problem is reflected, shall we say, and I'm sorry to have to make a reference to this, to the increasing suicide rates in modern times. In fact, suicide today has attained an epidemic proportion. As far as the statistics pertaining to India is concerned, according to the official records, National Crime Bureau records, annually, about 1.5 lakh people, 150,000 young people commit suicide. Now, if you know the social taboo associated with suicide, you will also understand what sociologists say in this regard, namely, that because of the very strong social sentiment against or social disapproval of suicide, not every suicide gets reported. In fact, a rough approximation is that only 1 out of 5 suicides get reported. So therefore, if you extrapolate this sociological insight, you will come to the alarming conclusion that annually about 7.5 lakh young people take their life. Now, people take their life because they find it no longer worthwhile to carry this burden. Life strikes them as a worthless burden which it is sensible to get rid of. Now, therefore, the theme that we are dealing with has very serious ramifications and implications, and therefore, it makes sense for us to attain some clarity on the subject of personality and what constitutes its strengths, its weaknesses, its bankruptcy, and its riches. Now, in this context, let me make a reference to an episode in the Gospel. It's the 19th chapter of the Gospel according to St. Matthew, where you have a very interesting and for us very relevant episode recorded there. A young man comes to Jesus with a question. The question is what he should do to enter eternal life. Now, I don't want to take you into the details of that conversation. I comment that text to you in case you're interested, and I hope you're interested. Now, Jesus makes it very clear that the sense of inner disquietude or inner restlessness, unhappiness, or shall I say the inner vacuity that the young person experiences is almost entirely on account of his placing his faith entirely on his material acquisitions. In another passage in the Gospel according to Luke, I think it's chapter 12, Jesus says, the life of a man does not comprise or consist of the abundance of his possessions. So there is something more to life than acquiring material possessions, riches, etc. So, and together with this also read the statement in the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 4 verse 4, that's the context of Jesus' temptation by Satan. And Jesus says to Satan, and Satan tempts him to turn stones into loaves of bread. Jesus responds by saying, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Now, all these things put together would tell us very clearly, emphatically, that human personality has a dimension that goes far beyond the reach and resources of the material world. This is not to say that the material world is worthless, relevant, it must be shunned, etc. That would be completely absurd, because even the material world is created by God, and whatever God has created has intrinsic worth. But the point is, a part of creation cannot be greater than the Creator himself, and therefore to bank entirely on an aspect of creation, no matter how large and limitless it seems, as the ultimate and sufficient means of life and resource of life, is quite absurd. Anyway, this particular point will become clearer as we go along, I hope. So, if you really look at the predicament of this young man who went to Jesus, and of course he came away unhappy because he was not able to accept the advice given by Jesus, namely that he should attain liberation from his abject dependence on material wealth. In fact, the text says he went, and I quote, he went away, that is, he went away from Jesus, he went away sorrowfully because he had much wealth. That's a very, very subtle way of saying that his sorrow is related to his wealth, not his poverty. Some people are sorrowful because they are poor. Other people are sorrowful because they are rich. And that's a paradox in the midst of which we live. So it's very interesting to reckon some of these things. And therefore, the question that this particular episode raises is, how should a young man take care of himself? How should a young man develop himself? Or to put it in more general terms, what does personality development mean? What does it involve? What is its logic? What are its do's and don'ts? That's a question. And this question is very central to the concerns of young people. That's the reason why I thought it would be worthwhile for us to examine this theme as simply and directly as we can. I invite you, therefore, to join the series of meditations. Now, I remember reading a book, the title of which is The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness. The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness. It's by an American author. His name is Erich Fromm, ERICH-FROMM. Now there he says something, he's not the only person to have said it. I'm just giving you a single reference to indicate that it's not my invention. And to be intellectually honest, I shouldn't claim the merit for what I have not created or invented. So he makes a distinction between two kinds of personality. One is the having centered or having driven personality. The other is being centric personality. That is to say, people who think of their life or build their life in terms of what they have, what they own, what they possess, wealth. the material things, things external to them. There is another kind of personality, the personality of being, which is centered not on having but on being. What kind of a human being are you? Like Jesus is saying, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Obviously, Jesus is referring to the second kind of personality, though I do not know if ğᴇᴜᴜᴜ has understood Jesus' concept of personality and his strategy for personality development to the extent that he should have, but I have derived valuable insights from ᴡɪᴜᴜᴜ, and therefore I am grateful to him. So, two different approaches. Now, I urge young people to be very clear on this. What kind of human beings do you want to be? Now, one thing that young people often fail to reckon is the fact that life does not remain the same. What you consider to be very exciting and very desirable now will become progressively meaningless. When you're young, the material things, the glamour and the glitter of the world would naturally attract you. But wisdom will enable you to look beyond this present superficial glitter and look at the larger realities that are shaping themselves behind the veil of time. And that's where, of course, we need to derive wisdom from the experiences of other people. People who have strained all their energies and their nerves in inflating and enlarging their acquisitions and therefore acquired much in life, find themselves in the evening of their life very disenchanted with themselves, also with what they have achieved. And therefore, all their lifelong acquisitions become worthless in their own eyes. They become, so to speak, junk, accumulated everywhere. These things do not really meet the most basic, quintessential needs of being human. So, Jesus sort of deals with this theme in the 6th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, where he talks about two kinds of wealth. He says, do not set your heart after the wealth of the world, the material wealth of the world, which is vulnerable to be stolen by thieves. Rust will degrade them, moth will eat them up. So, in other words, material wealth is merely passing and perishable. There is nothing enduring about whatever you acquire in this world. At any rate, most people say you don't take anything from this world. At the same time, surprisingly, a vast majority of people live entirely for these passing and perishable things of life, and they forget what is eternally valid, even including those who pretend to be totally focused on their eternity. So, Jesus therefore argues or recommends or suggests a shift from obsession with material acquisitions to a different kind of wealth. By the way, it's very important to emphasize at this point that poverty in itself is not to be desired. It's no good to be materially poor. In fact, material poverty is destitution. Destitution means degradation, and degradation invites public ridicule and your own personal disability, and therefore there is no intrinsic worth in poverty. When Jesus says, blessed are the poor, he doesn't mean that you should be lazy, do nothing in the world, and progressively sink into destitution. That's a horrible misunderstanding of that teaching. Jesus is saying that it is a terrible thing to equate your life with material acquisitions, and that it becomes clear when you think of the passage I've already quoted from Luke's Gospel. The life of a man does not consist of the abundance of, or does not lie in the abundance of his material possessions. So then, what exactly should we desire? What should we go after? If mere poverty is not at all desirable, it is as desirable as mere wealth from the point of view of being human. Poverty in itself, wealth in itself are exactly the same. in terms of personality development. In fact, uh, living entirely for material acquisitions and becoming rich thereby could be even more injurious to the development of healthy, dynamic and creative personality, a personality of light, than perhaps being sort of fettered in poverty and deprivation. So Jesus says that's not the desirable state. The desirable state is to shift from one idea of wealth to another idea of wealth. Jesus says, be rich, but understand what kind of richness is germane to or is relevant to your personality. Now, for example, if you have a gift, suppose you are a dancer, right? Now, it's not a blessing to you to eat rich food all the time. You have 5-star food served to you 5 times a day. That will kill your skill, your talent as a dancer. Suppose you're rich and you're able to drink plenty of liquor and you're a very, very talented singer and you smoke and do whatever you like. And then what happens? Your money will kill your talent. Whereas if you are a person who is devoted to music and you want to develop your musical talent to the uttermost and you are willing to renounce everything else for the sake of developing this. A good example is the renowned Indian Malayali playback singer ᴡɪᴜᴜᴜ. The discipline that he has maintained in life is very famous, and he talks about it with great happiness. And not only that he talks about it, people who have known him at close quarters have borne witness to it. So therefore, it's very clear, it is right and proper to mention this. So that accepting that discipline is maybe experienced as poverty by others, but it's a necessary condition for becoming rich in your talent as a singer. So now, for example, when you pursue wealth, invariably you compromise all your moral values and your ideals. One thing is absolutely clear. You cannot become rich in this world without practicing injustice, without lying and falsifying, without practicing cruelty and hard-heartedness, without withholding your sense of love and compassion for others, without a large degree of selfishness and egocentric aggression. So, what you're paying in order to become materially rich is really in terms of the coin of your own personality. You cease to be human, or you progressively lose the capacity to be human in your mad rush after material wealth. And this is a self-defeating thing, and that's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is not saying that you should be poor and destitute. Jesus is saying that you must develop these other resources, other wealth, which endures. Now, I'm an old man, therefore I can bear witness to you that what matters to me now is not how much money I have or I do not have in my bank. What matters is whether or not I have led a meaningful life, whether or not I have really succeeded in keeping my personality pure and vital, whether or not I have lived the values that I sort of recognized and approved of in theory, whether or not I have imparted some richness to the life of a few people in this world, whether or not I have left the stations of responsibility that I handled a little better than I accepted them or found them. These are the questions that matter a lot to me. It makes no difference to me whether I'm a millionaire or a billionaire, or whether I have plenty of money in the bank, or whether I can afford even ordinary means of life. It really doesn't matter, because your needs are reduced to the bare minimum. As you grow older, the good thing about growing old is that old age reduces and redefines your needs and pares them down to the absolute minimum. Today I don't need anything except you, except the love of my fellow human beings. So therefore, what we really need to do, now in my old age, if I experience any sense of continued relevance, it's not because of my material wealth, but because God gave me the wisdom to acquire some wealth within me. And when you have that wealth within you, you also experience an irresistible thirst to share it with somebody. Whereas material wealth will make you shrink from people and keep everything to yourself. Intellectual, spiritual wealth, the wealth of your being, takes the exact opposite route. It continuously wells up within you as the irresistible thirst to reach out to others and to share what little resources you have in order that their life too may be enriched. And that's the beauty of this kind of personality. So, as a young person, when you try to think of, understand and practice personality development, please keep this as a point of reference. The time will come when youth will depart and an entirely different stage of life would come. At that point in time, what kind of riches would be relevant is a question that you need to ask. There's a book in the Old Testament called the book of Ecclesiastes. And if you read the 12th chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes, you will understand the point that I'm trying to make far better. Maybe I should do a separate unit on chapter 12, which talks about the need that young people have, or the wisdom that young people must have to handle their youth aright. It says, remember your Creator while you're young, for a time will soon come when your predicament will be entirely different. And what that changed predicament will be is described so beautifully, so poetically by the author of this book, Ecclesiastes, chapter 12. Please read it. It's full of symbolism, and since most people are not adept or not trained in decoding symbols, I'll try and interpret that chapter in one of the videos. It makes excellent, in fact, absorbing reading, and you'll be amazed when the text is decoded, symbolically decoded for you, which I promise to do soon enough. So, our personality must be developed not in terms of these passing and perishable things which are external to us. Our personality must be developed in terms of being who we really are. Now, in this case, please think of the role models of the great people who are remembered today. Socrates owned nothing. Lord Buddha owned nothing. He was a prince, but he renounced his palace, his great wealth, possible material comfort, etc., and accepted a world of incredible spiritual discipline and material deprivation, out of which he generated the light that continues to guide tens and millions of people. Jesus was not rich. He said of himself, the birds in the air have their nests, the foxes have their holes, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So it's not material wealth that makes you relevant to the life of others. It's not material wealth that gives you a sense of self-worth. It is something else. And therefore, our approach to personality building must take this aspect into account, so that for all our great efforts otherwise we may not come to grief in course of time. So the benchmark of our personality development is very beautifully and symbolically indicated by Jesus. He says, you are the light of the world. But you can always say, well, today I'm not the light of the world. Fair enough. The point is, that should be the guiding light. We are mandated to be the light of the world. So we have to develop ourselves accordingly. Now, that light can come only from within. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 5, verses 14, 15, 16, Jesus talks about this aspect. He says, there is a light hidden within you. Your personality today is like a bushel that hides the light within. The light is within you. Every one of you is carrying this light. But you have not developed your personality in such a way that the light that's already within you, the light that's kindled by God Himself at the point of your birth, after all life emanates from God, and that's our belief. God is light, and therefore if there is life in you, that light is already within you. Light is intrinsic to your being. Are you born? You have come with light, and you are the light potentially. But God has also given you the duty to develop yourself in such a manner that the light that is today existing hidden within you, like a lamp under the bushel, your personality is like that today. You have to develop differently. And all this bushel that we are talking about is the material world. This light, instead of being hidden under the bushel, it can be put on the bushel if you like, so that the bushel doesn't have to be necessarily irrelevant or a necessary hindrance, or a hindrance alone can also be a help. If you have the wisdom to put the light on top of the bushel. So that is the kind of personality development Jesus recommends. And let me close my the preliminary reflections with you by saying that end of the day, personality is a spiritual concept. Modern world mistakes this grossly by thinking that personality is only a mask that you wear expertly for public consumption. As T.S. Eliot says in one of his poems, describing our public life today, all of us prepare a mask to face the masks that we face. Right? Social life is nothing but the interaction of masks. There is no genuine human interaction. Human beings do not come into contact with each other. That's because that's a tragedy, that's an aberration inherent in and inevitable in the materialistic culture. That's the point that T.S. Eliot makes, and I fully agree with him. So, personality is a spiritual concept, and if personality is to be developed in a dynamic, vital, wholesome manner, the outcome of which is that each one of us becomes light to the world, then we need to adopt an approach to personality development which conduces to this, or which facilitates this, rather than run after the idea of personality development as is currently practiced or pursued in this world, which understands personality only as a mask. Persona in Latin means a mask, and therefore personality is understood in the secular context as simply wearing a mask. What a pathetic understanding. So if you understand personality only as a mask that you wear for public consumption, quite naturally your approach to personality development will be entirely directed, dictated development by that false notion. On the other hand, if you understand personality to be a spiritual concept, which is what it is in truth, then your approach will be radically different. And in the teachings of Jesus Christ, you have the spiritual approach to personality development, and I hope to deal with it in a series of videos following this. Therefore, please treat this video only as a preliminary or introductory unit, and more will follow. I once again happily, joyfully invite young people to participate in this process of understanding personality development, and I hope to include my experiences, personal experiences in the series, which I have every reason to believe you will find relevant, useful, sometimes thought-provoking, and therefore may we enter into this process with humility, with great faith, and with gratitude to God, as well as commitment to each other. Thank you.